This happened in mid-October a few years back, when I was 20 and in my last year of college. It was a Thursday night and I'd just come out of a late class around 9, walking downtown to check out an open mic at a hookah lounge. Back then, downtown was familiar territory to me. 3 years at that school meant I knew which blocks were safe, which alleys to avoid, which streets fed back onto campus. There was usually an accordion player posted on one of the corners, which made the walk kind of charming. But that night, I didn't see him. The hookah place was either closed or not doing the open mic. I can't remember now, only that I turned around and started heading back, thinking about homework and how cold it was starting to get. That's when I noticed a scene unfolding on the sidewalk ahead. A very drunk woman pleading with 2 other women for a ride home. They looked like they were about to get into an Uber and either couldn't or wouldn't take her. I slowed down, debating if I should intervene. This wasn't exactly unusual for a college town on a Thursday night, but there was something off about how desperate she looked. When the other women brushed her off, she turned straight to me. I still had my backpack on, my phone battery was low, and I didn't even have a car at that point, just my feet and my knowledge of the area. But she gave me an address about 15 or 20 minutes north, and I knew roughly where that was. Being a young AFAB person myself, I thought I was doing the right thing by helping a drunk girl get home safe. Looking back, I wish I'd listened to the little voice in my head that told me not to. She was immediately thankful, almost giddy, like she couldn't believe someone had agreed to help her. We started walking and she said she had to pee badly. I reassured her we'd be at her place soon. She told me about her boyfriend, how he'd left her drunk and angry at a bar, and how she was from out of state. I commiserated, thinking how shitty that was. And when she asked what I was studying, I mentioned I was finishing a bachelor's in IT. That's when the conversation started to veer. She began talking about her experience with the dark net, dropping weird comments about online stuff. Her mood kept shifting, from sad to excitable to almost manic, and she kept drifting too close to me as we walked. I'd tell her to walk ahead of me or give me space, but she'd still slip back to my side. Half a mile in, maybe less than a mile from the address she'd given, her phone rang. It was the boyfriend. She put him on speakerphone, and from what he was saying, he sounded like a complete jerk. I'd had enough, so I snapped at him to chill out and told him where we were. And in an instant, his tone went from aggressive to weirdly friendly. Every hair on my body stood up. Then she started saying things about how I'd have a good time at their house, like it was already decided. My instincts went into overdrive. Something was very, very wrong. We reached an intersection with a gas station. I told her I needed to stop and use the bathroom. She said she didn't need to anymore, which made me feel even sicker, but I insisted. I ducked into the bathroom, locked the door, and texted a friend asking if she could pick me up or if I needed to call campus Safe Ride. She said it'd take a minute, but she was on her way. When I came out, the woman was gone. Not in the store, not outside in the lot, just vanished. I didn't go looking for her. I bought a soda, sat down, and waited under the bright lights and security cameras until my friend arrived with 2 others. They took me back to one of their dorms, and we spent the evening together until I calmed down. Later, someone told me that dermal piercings like the one on her cheek are sometimes associated with sex trafficking. I don't know if that's true, but combined with the bizarre shifts in tone, the weird story about the boyfriend, and the way she disappeared the moment I was in a safe public space, it sure felt like a setup. Months later, I saw her again at a drag bar and spent the entire night panicking quietly at our table. I'll never know what would have happened if I'd kept walking her home, but I'm glad I trusted my gut and stopped when I did. This October will mark 3 years since I lived through something that felt like it had been pulled straight out of a low-budget horror movie. At the time, I'd been dating my then-boyfriend for about a year, and to celebrate, we booked a weekend at one of those Mohican Treehouse cabins in Ohio. I'd read glowing reviews online about how beautiful and secluded it was, and the pictures of the cabins, all wooden beams and fairy lights strung through the branches, made it look like the perfect romantic escape. The weather that weekend was crisp and bright, leaves just starting to turn, and when we pulled up to our cabin, I remember thinking how lucky we were. That first day really was as good as the reviews had promised. We sprawled out on the balcony, watched movies inside, wandered along the little footpaths twisting through the woods. It felt peaceful, almost too perfect. I went to bed that night already thinking about exploring the tiny town nearby the next day. The second day we did exactly that, poking around some antique shops, stopping at a small diner for lunch. By evening, my boyfriend wanted to go somewhere he could catch his favorite team on TV since our treehouse didn't have cable. I was nursing a mild cold and didn't feel up for it, but I figured I could tough it out, sip a beer or two, and keep him company while he watched the game. We got to the bar around 8, and immediately I felt the shift in the atmosphere. It wasn't a friendly neighborhood bar. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, and you could tell outsiders weren't exactly welcome. The bartender was chatting with a knot of local men and barely glanced at us. My boyfriend, though, didn't care. He strolled right up, ordered our drinks, and kept trying to high-five the locals every time something good happened in the game. It was second-hand embarrassment at its finest. Meanwhile, the bartender kept sliding beers in front of me without asking. I'd been downing Blue Moons to escape my boyfriend's cringe, and figured it was just generosity at first. But something about the way he kept refilling my glass started to make me uneasy. I cut myself off. I'm a lightweight, and already wasn't feeling great. A few more guys drifted in, and my boyfriend, because he can't keep anything to himself, told one of them that we weren't from around here, and were staying up in the tree houses. That's when my stomach dropped. Suddenly I felt lightheaded, dizzy, like the air in the bar had shifted. Maybe it was my cold, maybe the alcohol, maybe just nerves. Either way, the place was emptying out, and the vibe was turning dark. I told him I wanted to leave. We walked out to the car, but the moment he turned the key, something felt off. He parked at a Taco Bell across the street and hopped out to check. Our tires had been slashed, all of them. I was half asleep and didn't process what was happening until he cursed loudly. His own tire iron was bent and useless, so he said he'd run back to the bar to ask if someone had one he could borrow. Leaving me in the car, he jogged across the street. Inside, there was only one man left sitting at a table. Before my boyfriend even opened his mouth, the man looked up and said, "A little birdie told me you have a flat tire." That sentence alone sent chills down his spine. Still, he asked if the guy had a tire iron. The man said he did, at his apartment just around the corner, and told him to follow. He went, but as soon as he stepped inside, alarms went off in his head. The place was filled with stacks of papers, boxes, and huge plastic barrels, like the kind used for hazardous waste. The guy was moving slowly, rummaging, muttering that he just needed to check a few more spots for the tire iron. That's when it clicked for my boyfriend. He'd been lured away from the car. From me. Without another word, he turned and bolted, running back to the car as fast as he could. He jumped in, started the engine, and took off on the rims, sparks flying as he barreled up a dark, empty road back toward the treehouse. No streetlights, no other cars, just black forest pressing in on either side. It felt like we were being chased, even though we couldn't see anyone. When we got back, reality sank in. People at that bar now knew exactly where we were staying. We didn't sleep much. We sat up in the treehouse with a hatchet on the floor between us, listening for any sound outside. At first light, we called for someone to come change the tires and left without looking back. I've replayed that night in my head countless times, and every time I come to the same conclusion. They wanted him away from me, and I don't even want to imagine what would have happened next if he hadn't trusted his gut and run. It's been 6 years now, but that morning still replays in my head like a scene I can't erase. Back then, I was a sophomore in high school, and my mornings were pretty routine. Our school started early, so if I wanted to get through the metal detectors and still make it to my first class on time, I had to be out the door by 6:30 a.m. sharp. The walk to school wasn't long, maybe 10, 15 minutes if I kept up a steady pace. But at that hour, the streets were always quiet and a little eerie. This was sometime in late October, or maybe early November, when the air was cold enough to sting your cheeks, but not yet freezing. I remember because it was still dark when I stepped outside, that bluish pre-dawn kind of dark, where you can see your breath in the streetlights. That morning I was zipping up my jacket and pulling on my backpack straps, when I noticed my aunt struggling at the door with a few oversized laundry bags. We were renting a small place back then, and the laundromat was only a block away, so she'd haul the bags there every week. I figured I still had a few minutes to spare, so I helped her load the cart, gave her a quick hug goodbye, and turned to head towards school. That's when I saw him. He was standing maybe 15 feet away, right near the edge of the sidewalk. Big, easily over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and a heavy build. He wore a gray jacket, a baseball cap pulled low, faded blue jeans, and sneakers. There was a duffel bag at his feet, but what struck me most was the way he was just watching. I did what I always do when I pass men alone on the street, kept my eyes down and moved quickly, like if I didn't engage he wouldn't notice me. It had become second nature, a little defense mechanism from past experiences. But before I could pass, he bent down, dropped his duffel bag onto the ground, and outstretched his arms wide like he was waiting for me to run to him. His voice was rough and loud when he called out, "Give me a hug, baby girl. You look so good." My stomach flipped. I turned instinctively back toward my aunt, who thankfully had just started rolling the laundry cart down the street. She caught my eye immediately, saw my face, and called, "Do you know him?" When I shook my head no, she yelled for me to get back inside. I didn't think. I just ran. I turned and bolted for the door, and as soon as I moved, he moved too. The sound of his sneakers hitting the pavement right behind me made my heart jump into my throat. I could actually feel the air shift behind me when his hand almost caught the back of my shirt. Somehow my aunt and I got the door closed, just as he hit it. We turned the lock and braced against it as he started pounding with both fists. His voice through the wood was even worse than his face. "Next time, Mommy won't save you. I know where you live. I'll be back. I'll get you." I'll never forget the way the door shook under his fists. My aunt was on the phone with the police, her hands trembling as she gave them our address. After maybe a minute, though it felt much longer, the banging stopped. We heard his footsteps retreat, then some kind of grunting noise. When we peeked through the window, he had taken the laundry bags my aunt had left by the steps, dragged them halfway down the block, ripped them open, and dumped the clothes into the street. I don't know what he thought that would do, but seeing our clothes scattered out there felt like a violation all its own. It took the cops over 30 minutes to arrive, even though the station was literally a couple minutes away. They took my statement, wrote down his description, but told us it wasn't much to go on. For the next 2 weeks, my boyfriend's dad drove me to school every morning. Even then, I'd still glance over my shoulder the whole way, afraid I'd see that man standing somewhere on the sidewalk again. We moved not long after that. This happened so long ago that it almost feels like something I dreamed, except I still remember every detail as clearly as if it happened yesterday. It was 1988, or maybe 1989, and I was about 10 years old, living with my family in Calgary, Alberta. We had a modest house in a quiet little cul-de-sac where all the neighbors knew each other, and as a kid I thought it was the safest place in the world. Every morning and afternoon, I'd take a shortcut home from school. Instead of walking the long way around the street, I'd hop our backyard fence. It was tall, probably 7 feet, but there were 2 big cable boxes right up against it on the other side, which made it easy to scramble up and over. I'd been doing it for years and never thought twice about it. Just behind our cul-de-sac was a stretch of green space that separated our street from a row of townhouses. All the kids from our block would ride our bikes and play tag there, weaving between the rows of homes and up and down the little paths. It was our playground. That day in October was picture day at school, and I remember walking home still wearing the outfit my mom had picked out, holding the little comb they gave us for our hair. The sun was bright but low in the sky, making long shadows across the grass. Everything felt normal, until it didn't. As I walked along the green strip past the townhouses, I noticed someone ahead of me, a man. He was raking leaves near one of the townhome doors, his back turned. He wasn't big, kind of slight actually, with a mop of curly copper-red hair that almost glowed in the sunlight. He looked like an ordinary neighbor doing an ordinary chore. But the moment I saw him, my body went cold. My feet stopped moving before I even realized it. I can still remember the way the air felt around me, heavy and still, and the way my heart started hammering like I'd been running, even though I hadn't moved an inch. My stomach knotted. I had no reason to be afraid of this man, but I was frozen, every nerve in my body screaming at me to get away. I gasped involuntarily, sucking in a sharp breath that felt too loud in the quiet. He turned around slowly, rake in hand, and looked right at me. His voice wasn't harsh at all, almost gentle, like he was trying to soothe me. "You don't have to be afraid of me," he said. And just like that, I felt the spell break. I heard myself stammer, "I'm not." But the second the words left my mouth, I bolted. I didn't even bother with the cable boxes that time. I practically flew over that fence and tore into our back door, locking it behind me and pressing my back to it until my heart slowed down. I sat there for a long time waiting for my parents to come home. When they did, I told them about the man and how scared I'd felt. Because nothing had actually happened. He hadn't touched me. He hadn't even raised his voice. My parents chalked it up to me spooking myself. And after a few days, even I started to feel like maybe I'd overreacted. The man didn't reappear, and soon life went back to normal. A couple of weeks later, I woke up in the middle of the night to flickering red and blue lights casting strange shadows on my bedroom walls. My mom came into my room and said something was going on behind the house. She asked if I wanted to come watch from our second-story balcony. At 10 years old, that sounded exciting, so I followed her upstairs. What I saw out there is burned into my memory forever. Police cars lined the street. Officers in heavy gear moved across the grass with dogs straining at their leashes. There was even a small battering ram, which 2 men carried up to one of the townhome doors. In the cool night air, with the lights and the radios and the sound of boots on pavement, it felt like a scene from a movie. Then I saw him. The same slight man with the bright red hair being led out of the house in handcuffs, head down, his face pale in the flashing lights. I remember turning to my mom, almost hysterical, saying over and over, "That's him! That's the man I saw!" For the first time, I felt like my fear had been justified. We didn't find out right away what had happened inside that house. It wasn't until a day or two later that my mom sat me down with the newspaper. That friendly neighbor, the one who told me I didn't have to be afraid, had 2 girls, about my age, chained up in his basement. The paper said they'd been put through unimaginable things. I think about that day often, how close I was, how easily I could have been another name in that article. It still chills me to remember how polite he sounded when he told me not to be afraid, because he was exactly the person I should have been afraid of. I'm turning 19 this year, and even though this all happened when I was 15, I still get a knot in my stomach every time I think about it. Back then, I was in my first year of lycée, junior year in France, awkward, lonely, and constantly online. I had just made my first Twitter account, a small one, with maybe 20 or 30 followers, and I liked that nobody from school or my family knew about it. My profile picture was just a generic avatar, and I'd put Paris as my location, even though I actually lived in the suburbs. It was supposed to be my little private corner of the internet. One October evening, a notification popped up, A DM from someone I didn't know. The account had about 200 followers. His message was polite, written in French, but with a name that sounded foreign. "Hi, my name's Rob. I'm 17, and I'll be moving to your city soon. I'll be going to the high school there, and I don't know anyone yet." The name of my town was right there in the message. My heart skipped. I knew I'd never written it in my bio. For a second, I wondered if he was stalking me. But then I remembered that weeks before I'd posted a tweet about buses in my area and mentioned the town. Maybe he'd just searched the keyword and found me. I told myself it was nothing. His age didn't seem strange either. I'd skipped a grade and most of my classmates were younger than me anyway. So after a few minutes of hesitation, I wrote back. At first it was normal, even fun. We talked about the school cafeteria, teachers, the commute. Late at night, he started sneaking in little personal questions. Do you live far from school? House or apartment? Do you live with both your parents? You're not often home alone, are you? They set off a little alarm bell in my head. I ignored them, thinking if he pushed harder I'd block him. But he didn't. He was too subtle. We kept talking the next day, and the next. He always answered my questions with easy honesty, like he wanted to build trust. Meanwhile, I never gave him details about my home, but little by little, I started to like him. He was kind, attentive, always saying things I needed to hear. After years of being bullied, that felt like water in the desert. I let my guard down. In France, we have a 2-week break in October. The day before classes started again, he told me he'd finally moved to my town and would be coming to my high school. He asked where we could meet on the first day back. I suggested the hall at break time, but he said he might not recognize me in a crowd and didn't want to waste time looking. Maybe somewhere quieter, he suggested. It was a red flag I ignored. I told him to meet me on the 3rd-floor bathroom during morning break, a place off limits during recess, so we'd be alone. It felt slightly creepy, but I told myself nothing bad could happen on school grounds. The next day I dressed up a little, excited to finally meet him. When the break bell rang, I rushed upstairs and waited. And then he walked in. It was him. He looked like his profile photo, but older. Not 17, 20, maybe more. We talked for a while, and he was charming, just like online. When the break ended, he asked me to go to lunch at a fast food place. I refused because I had no money and never let people pay for me. He looked disappointed, but offered to walk me to my bus stop after school instead. That became our routine. We'd meet in the bathroom during break, and he'd walk me to the bus stop in the afternoon. Strangely, I never saw him anywhere else. Not in the halls, not at the cafeteria. But with a school that big, I figured our paths just didn't cross. This went on for about 6 weeks. Then, on December 14th, I made a mistake. I told him how lonely I'd be that evening. My dad out of the country, my mom working late, my siblings away. I'd built up so much trust by then that it felt harmless to share. That evening, he walked me to the bus stop as usual. I got on, waved goodbye, put in my earphones. It was already dark. 2 stops later, I stepped off and immediately felt it. That instinct you can't explain, the prickling on your neck. I left the music paused but kept my earphones in so it looked like I couldn't hear. Footsteps behind me. Slow, steady. I didn't look back. My neighborhood was quiet at night, no one around. My fingers searched for my keys in my pocket, trembling. When I reached my door, I ran. Somehow I managed to get inside, slam it shut, and turn the lock. My alarm beeped, confirming what I already knew. I was home alone. Through the glass panel on the door, I saw him. Rob, standing a few meters away with a look on his face that froze my blood. He had followed me. For a minute, we just stared at each other. When my shock broke, I ran to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and came back to the door. He was still there. Now he was banging on the glass, hard enough that I thought it might shatter. He circled the house, pounding on the shutters. I pressed against the door, praying it would hold. Finally, headlights appeared, my neighbor's car pulling into their driveway. Rob bolted into the dark. My phone buzzed with message after message from him. I blocked him. He made new accounts, each one just a jumble of numbers with his initial, each one sending insults and threats, until I deleted my profile completely. Later, out of curiosity, I spoke to kids at school who were supposed to be in his class. Not one of them had ever heard of a Rob. He wasn't a student. He had never been. And that's why I never saw him anywhere except when he wanted me to. I still don't know what would have happened if I hadn't run, if the door hadn't held, if my neighbor hadn't come home when they did. But I know I'll never underestimate my instincts again. It all started a little over a year ago, when my family and I had just moved into the neighborhood we live in now. It was October, and the house felt unusually hot at night. My sister thought it would help to open her window for some fresh air while she finished her homework. I was in my room getting ready for bed, when suddenly she rushed in, looking pale and nervous. She said she'd heard footsteps outside, the sound of someone moving through the fallen leaves just beneath her window. At first, I brushed it off and assumed it was probably just an animal. But when I followed her back to her room and stood there for a few minutes, I heard it too. Clear as day, leaves crunching under slow, deliberate footsteps. We looked out into the yard just in time to hear something running off into the woods. It unsettled us, but I didn't think it was anything serious. That would turn out to be the beginning of something much stranger. When winter came, I spent a lot of time exploring the woods behind our house. I liked climbing trees and wandering further back to the open fields. After the first real snowfall, I was excited to get outside, and I climbed my usual tree to look out over the white landscape. That's when I noticed something that stopped me cold. Footprints in the snow leading directly toward my house. At first it didn't seem strange, but then I realized they didn't come from our yard. They started somewhere deep in the woods, walked straight to our home, then turned back. They didn't wander or stray like someone out for a walk. They moved with purpose, like whoever it was had been watching us. I followed them until they disappeared at a rusty old fence covered in snow. Months passed, and I tried not to think about it. But in October the following year, something happened that made it impossible to ignore. One night I was lying in bed, my room completely dark, when I heard my doorknob turning. Slowly, carefully, someone pushed the door open. My heart stopped. My door is always closed when I go to bed. I froze under the blanket, every muscle locked. Thinking it might have been my sister, I quickly texted her, asking if she'd come into my room. She replied almost instantly. She wasn't even home. She was across town with a friend. That's when panic set in. I reached under my pillow and grabbed the baton I kept there, then texted my dad. He came running in minutes later with a knife, turning the lights on as we searched the house from top to bottom. Everything was locked, the alarm was still set, and nothing seemed out of place. But I knew what I'd heard, and I couldn't shake the feeling someone had been inside. Later that winter, my relatives came to visit and stayed in the basement. One night, my uncle woke up around 3 a.m. with the unsettling sense that someone was watching him. As his eyes adjusted to the darkness, he saw a man outside the basement window. He described him as thin, with long hair blowing in the cold air, shivering as he stood there staring inside. My uncle screamed, grabbed the baby and rushed upstairs. In the morning, I went outside to look for proof and found a faint sneaker print in the snow, right by the window where my uncle had seen him. It matched his story perfectly. The man had leaned against the side of the house to peer in. Things quieted down for a while, but then last night, something happened that pushed me over the edge. I couldn't sleep, and since the Christmas lights I usually kept on were bothering me, I unplugged them and tried to rest in the pitch dark. Just as I was drifting off, I heard the sharp sound of my guitar strings being strummed, followed by something falling over as if someone had knocked into it and tried to catch it. My body froze, every instinct screaming at me that I wasn't alone. My baton was on my desk, too far to grab without exposing myself, so I did the only thing I could. I pretended to be asleep. Minutes crawled by like hours until I heard a faint whimper coming from my sister's room. That was enough to break my fear. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and armed myself with the baton. Bursting into her room, I yelled, expecting the worst. But she was fine, just as startled by me as I was terrified for her. I stood there shaking, tears running down my face, staring back at the pitch-black hallway that led to my room. I've never felt so convinced that someone was inside our house, watching us, waiting. After everything, the footsteps in the leaves, the tracks in the snow, the doorknob turning, my uncle's sighting, and now this. I can't help but believe that someone has been stalking our family, maybe sneaking in at night, maybe planning something worse. And the thought of that has left me more terrified than anything I've ever experienced.